a son of the South, he speaks the truth, and then he does something about it. It takes guts and courage and vision to be John Edwards. Please rise to your feet and give him a rousing Georgia welcome. Senator John Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor, very much. And it's great to be back in Georgia. Great to be back in Atlanta. I want to say a personal thank you to one of the extraordinary leaders and great mayors in America, your mayor, Atlanta's Mayor, Shirley Franklin. Thank you, Mayor, for your leadership. And to my friend, Governor Barnes and Mayor, thank you for your courage and your leadership. We're very, very proud of you. And also just a word of appreciation to an extraordinary woman, Yolanda King, who lost her life in the last couple of days and who was a wonderful leader, not just for Georgia, but for all of America. You know, in 1976, a son of Georgia ran for the Democratic nomination for president, was nominated as the Democratic candidate for president, campaigned in Georgia, campaigned across the South, won the state of Georgia, and won the presidency. 16 years later, in 1992, another son of the South, Governor Bill Clinton from Arkansas, ran for the Democratic nomination, won the Democratic nomination, campaigned all across the South, won the state of Georgia, and won the presidency for the Democratic Party. And you may have figured out where this is going. 16 years later. In 2008, a Southerner from North Carolina is running for the Democratic nomination for president, and I'm here to tell you, when I am the Democratic nominee for president, I will campaign in Georgia, I will win the state of Georgia, and we will win the presidency in 2008 with the voters of Georgia backing us in that election. And Lord knows we got work to do. We got work to do in this country. We got work to do in this world. You know, first of all, I want to say a personal thank you from my wife, Elizabeth, who I spoke to just a few minutes ago backstage. She sends her love to all of you. You have no idea what all of you have meant to her, to me, to our family. And she's asked me to say a special word of appreciation to you, a thank you to all of you for your love and support. And by the way, she's doing great, doing absolutely great. I look at what America's confronted with, not just at home, but in the world. And starting with the bleeding sore that is Iraq. And it's so obvious, and the American people get it. They get it in a way that the President of the United States still does not get, that we need desperately to make a turn, to have a change of course in Iraq. And I have a very simple view about this. America needs to be leaving Iraq. That's what America needs to be doing. And just to be clear, here's what I believe needs to happen. The voters of America sent a mandate in November of 2006, and that mandate was, we want a different course in Iraq. They put the Democrats in charge of the Congress, in charge of the House, in charge of the Senate. The Democrats have met their responsibility. They sent a bill to the President supporting the troops, funding the troops, with a timetable for withdrawal. The President of the United States, who is convinced he can do no wrong, vetoed that bill. Now the bill's back in the Congress. It appears that we don't have the votes to override the veto. So here's what I believe the Congress should do. They should send this president another bill funding the troops with a timetable for withdrawal. If the president vetoes that, they should send him another bill funding the troops with a timetable for withdrawal. If he vetoes that, they should send him another bill funding the troops with a timetable for withdrawal. The Congress should stand its ground. And here's the reason. Because this is not about politics. We have men and women, courageous, extraordinary patriots who have served in Iraq, some who've lost their lives in Iraq, some who are leaving America today to serve us in Iraq. They deserve leadership that stands with them. They deserve leadership who understands this is about life and death, and it's about war, and it's not about politics. And we desperately need to stand up against this president who not only believes he can do no wrong, but is on a tragic course in Iraq. This is an historic moment in American history, and it's time for our party, my party, the Democratic Party, to show some strength and courage and backbone and do what's right about this war, to bring this war to an end and to bring our men and women home from Iraq. But brothers and sisters, it's not just what we do in Iraq. This goes way beyond Iraq. You know, I watch what's happening in the world. Since the last election, I've been all over the world, spent a lot of time overseas, and it's absolutely clear that a couple of things are true. Number one, the world thinks America's a bully, and the world thinks we're selfish. It's not true, but that's their perception. This has to change. The President of the United States, in the first 90 days in office, has to travel the world and speak to the world, as others have said, not just about the place that is America, but the idea that is America. And that idea is equality and diversity. It is the heart and soul of who we are. And the world needs to hear that from the President of the United States, because today they don't believe it. They think we're at war with the Muslim world. That has to change. They will never follow us unless they believe that America is a force for good again, that America is a country worthy of leadership. They have to see America as the light. Remember, we used to be the light. The whole world would say, America, that's who we want to be like. We have to go back to that place. And it's going to take more than ending the war in Iraq. It's going to take more than the President of the United States speaking the words. We're going to have to demonstrate by our action that we're committed not only to ourselves, but to humanity, that we understand our responsibility to humanity. Do we need to remain strong militarily, economically, politically? Absolutely we do. But that strength has to be married to the moral authority to lead. It is the only way the rest of the world will follow us again. Now, here are some examples. And by the way, the reason it matters to us and to the rest of the world, not just America, is we are the only potential stabilizing force in the world. We are the stability. No other country can provide stability. We live in a dangerous, chaotic world, and it will continue to be dangerous and chaotic unless the world can rally around America. They will not do that unless they see us as a force for good. Here are some things we could do. Today, right now, there's a genocide going on in Western Sudan in Darfur. Hundreds of thousands have died. Women have been raped. Villages have been destroyed, mostly at the hands of a group called the Janjaweed Militia, supported by the Sudanese government. The Sudanese government is propped up by the Chinese who buy oil in Sudan. Now look at this for just a minute, instead of through our eyes. See this through the eyes of the world. This is what the world sees. The most powerful nation on the planet has declared that a genocide is occurring years ago, and then stepped back and watched it continue. What would you think of us? Tonight in Africa, there will be thousands of children born with AIDS, a whole new generation of children with AIDS. Why? because their mother can't pay $4 for a dose of medicine. $4. And the richest nation on the planet stands back and watches this continue. What would you think of us? We're better than this. The United States of America is better than this. We are not the country of Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib, and the world needs to see our humanity. They need to see our better angels again. And here's an example. I believe in it, and I don't know how popular it'll ever be politically in this country, but I believe it's an example of what America should be doing. Suppose, instead of spending $500 billion in Iraq, America led an international effort to make primary school, ages 6 to 15, available to the 100 million children in the world who have no education whatsoever, in Africa, in the Muslim world, in Latin America. Instead of having children educated in madrasas and taught to hate what America represents, all of a sudden they have hope. They have opportunity. This is the way America can demonstrate that we are a force for good in the world again, that we're a country worthy of following, that we're once again the light that the rest of the world should follow. And it's not just what we do over there. It's also what we do here. Here we are 4% of the world's population, emitting 25% of the world's greenhouse gases. We're not an example for good, we're an example for bad. We can't go to China and India and the rest of the world and say, help us develop a solution to this crisis. And global warming is a crisis by any conceivable measure. You look at what the Pentagon says, about what will happen in the world. If the temperature on the face of the earth goes up 4 to 8 degrees over the next 75 years, you're going to see migration of hundreds of millions of people. Not enough food, not enough water. It's going to make World War look mild. America needs to lead. Here's what I think we need to do. I think we ought to cap carbon emissions in America, a national cap. We ought to ratchet that cap down every single year. Below that cap, we ought to auction off the right to emit any greenhouse gases. That money, $30 to $40 billion, ought to be used to transform the way we use energy. National investment in clean, renewable sources of energy, wind, solar, cellulose-based biofuels. We ought to put $1 billion into the development of carbon sequestration technology so that we can capture carbon that's being emitted. We ought to put $1 billion into making sure that America, not the rest of the world, builds the most fuel-efficient vehicles on the planet with organized labor workers, with union workers. We ought to help decentralize the way power, electricity is provided in this country. You think about the way we work today. Large power companies, centralized, provide power. How do they make money? The more electricity you use, the more money they make. We need to change that incentive. We need to decentralize these power grids, create more competition, community groups, grassroots-based groups. We ought to be producing 25% of our electricity by the year 2025 from renewable sources of energy. And then finally, it is time for the President of the United States to ask America to be patriotic about something other than war. It is time for the President of the United States to ask all of us to be willing to conserve, to drive more fuel-efficient vehicles, to conserve in our homes, to conserve in our workplaces. We have to do this together. The President of the United States can't do this by himself. We have a dysfunctional healthcare system in America, by any possible measure. It does not work. We have 47 million Americans with no healthcare coverage at all. Insurance premiums up 90% in the last 6 years. This has to change. What we need is a very specific, truly universal healthcare plan, so that every man, woman, and child in America is covered by healthcare. Here's my specific idea of what we should do. My plan says this: employers have to cover their employees or pay into a fund for coverage. We'll have health care markets all over this country. Everyone in this room can go into that market and choose your health care plan, a private plan or a government plan. They'll both be available. The government plan is basically Medicare Plus. We're going to subsidize health insurance premiums up to about $100,000 of income. We're going to cover all the cracks in our health care system, which means we outlaw, ban pre-existing conditions. No more in health care in America. We will treat mental health exactly the same as physical health. True mental health parity. We're going to cover preventative care, long-term care, chronic care, dental care, vision care, all covered. You can take your health care with you as you go from one job to the next, or if you're laid off, and we're going to bring down the cost of health care. Today we spend 30 to 40 cents of every health care dollar on administrative costs, not on health care. We're going to mandate lower administrative costs, mandate the use of technology, mandate electronic record keeping, and we're going to, by law, require that every man, woman, and child in America is covered. The cost of this health care plan, $90 to $120 billion a year. Paid for by rolling back George Bush's tax cuts for people who make over $200,000 a year. Now, if you hadn't figured it out by now, you're going to figure out really quickly that I don't think careful, cautious steps will deal with the challenges that we face. I think we have to be strong, we have to be bold, our party has to be visionary and to be willing to lead, to not be driven by polls, not be driven by focus groups, not be careful anymore. You think about when great American presidents have led in the past, FDR, John Kennedy, we were big, we were bold, we were visionary. This is the kind of leadership America and the world needs from us again. And an issue that's near and dear to my heart, I don't know how powerful it is politically, I'll concede that to you, but it is not okay that we have 37 million of our own people who wake up every single day worried about feeding and clothing their children. It is not okay. And many of you know that I've been running a poverty center at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I'm very proud of that. I've just had a book come out. Didn't come here to hawk my book, but if you want to buy it, the name of it is Ending Poverty in America. I'm actually the editor. There are lots of writers for the book, but it's a comprehensive agenda for how we end poverty in this country. And it says something about our character. What do we do about millions of our own people who wake up every day in poverty? This idea that what we do overseas is foreign policy, what we do here is domestic policy, this is a fantasy. Everything we do overseas affects us at home. Everything we do here affects the rest of the world. There's no one in this room should believe that those pictures that came out of the 9th Ward of New Orleans when the hurricane hit, that those pictures are only seen by us. I'm here to tell you the whole world saw them. I saw a publication overseas after the hurricane hit. It showed pictures of the victims in the lower 9th Ward, and the headline was in bold print, "The Shaming of America." The world knows we're powerful, and they know we're rich. Here's what they want to know. Do we care enough to actually do something about this? I grew up, some of you did too, watching great American leaders address this issue. LBJ, I remember watching Bobby Kennedy when I was a teenager go through Appalachia and show us the other America that most Americans either didn't know about or didn't want to think about. We have to be bold, we have to be courageous. And I'm going to say something, I'm only speaking for me now, but if my party, the Democratic Party that I love so much, if we're not willing to stand up and speak out with courage for the poor, for the disenfranchised, for the disabled, for what purpose do we exist? We have to be the voice for those who have no voice, for the voiceless, for the disenfranchised, for all those people who need us to stand for them. That is what we are at our heart and soul as a party. And we can never, ever forget that, because when we do, we lose our soul. And for all those people who say, and I hear it all the time, the naysayers, there's nothing you can do to end poverty in America. It's not the truth. There's a lot we can do. Some of the things are pretty simple. Number one, we can end the embarrassment of our national minimum wage and raise the minimum wage in America. The greatest anti-poverty movement in American history is the organized labor movement. And we need to strengthen the ability of workers to organize in the workplace. You know, I'm actually proud of the fact that since the last election, I've been all over this country helping organize workers into unions, helping lift workers out of poverty. And I have, unfortunately, sometimes seen the abuses that occur. We need real democracy in the workplace. I got a really simple rule for this. If you can join the Democratic Party or the Republican Party by signing your name to a card, any worker in America ought to be able to join a union by doing exactly the same thing. That is democracy. There are lots of other things we can do. Access to college, the ticket for kids being able to get out of poverty. We've had Bush and his gang have taken billions of dollars out of the federal budget for kids to be able to go to college. This is insanity. Here's an idea. It's called College for Everyone. I had it a few years ago, talked about it in the last campaign, and since the last election, we've actually put it in place in a poor section of eastern North Carolina. I raised the money for it, Elizabeth and I helped with it, and the idea is very simple. And we should do this nationally, not just in one part of North Carolina. College for everyone. Here's the idea. For every kid who graduates from high school, qualified to go to college, if they'll commit to work at least 10 hours a week when they're in school, we pay for their tuition and books. Very simple, very straightforward. And what it does is it eliminates the bureaucratic barriers. We don't just give them their tuition, they gotta earn it. They gotta work for it. Nothing wrong with that. Most of us in this room worked at some point when we were in school. That's a good thing. And when they graduate from college, they won't have this crushing burden of debt that so many of our young people are faced with. Whether it is universal health care, lifting families out of poverty, access to decent housing, access to college, we have got to strengthen and grow the middle class in this country. Organizing workers, my brothers and sisters from organized labor over here, we're organizing workers. We have got to strengthen and grow the middle class. Last year, the top 300,000 income earners in America earned more than the bottom 150 million. We have a huge income disparity in this country. We have a huge wealth disparity. And I don't know about you, but I'm willing to bet, this is all of you are Democrats, that you don't want to live in a country made up of a few rich people and everybody else. We want to live in an America with a growing, strong, and vibrant middle class, where the middle class is the foundation for this democracy, the strength of this democracy, the middle class that so many of us grew up in and gave us the values that we carry with us today. But the last thing I want to say to all of you, all these issues, making America the moral leader that it should be in the world, dealing with this mess in Iraq, universal health care, energy transformation, global warming, ending poverty in this country, I'm here to tell you that your country needs you. It needs you so badly. You think about the great movements that have occurred in American history. We need a movement today. But the great movements in American history did not begin in the Oval Office. They began right here, out here across this country. Many of you, just like me, you know, I grew up in the South. I grew up in the segregated South. I watched the Civil Rights Movement up close and personal, as most or all of you did. The Civil Rights Movement didn't begin in the Oval Office in Washington, D.C. It began all across this country on places like college campuses, where young people had the courage and strength and passion to stand up and speak out for a wrong and to fight to right that wrong. The same thing happened in stopping the war in Vietnam. The same thing happened 20-some-odd years ago in ending the apartheid regime in South Africa. You can feel the same movement happening right now on the war in Iraq. But I'm here to tell you that this can't be done by the President of the United States alone. As John Kennedy said in his inauguration, ask not what your country can do for you. Your country needs you. It needs you badly. There are some things it's obvious we need you for. Speaking out with strength and courage about the war in Iraq, doing the things that need to be done to conserve and get us off our addiction to oil. And then some things only you know. Only you know what your special capacity, what your special talent is. But I'm here to tell you, your country needs you and needs you desperately. As Gandhi said, you have to be the change that you believe in. We need change. America desperately needs change. And if all of us want to be the power to bring about that change, we have to do it together. Every single one of us together. Here's what it boils down to. If you want to live in a moral and just America that you're proud of, and you want to see America leading once again in a moral and just world, we have to join arms, every single one of us, because I'm here to tell you that together we can do it. God bless you all. It's a great privilege and honor for me to be here in Atlanta, in Georgia, with all of you, and we're going to carry Georgia in the 2008 presidential election with your help, with your work, with your participation. God bless you all, and thank you very much.